Alright, technique video. Been a minute since I've done one of these. As the thumbnail has probably cued you in on, I'm going to be looking at Kukinage, more commonly referred to as Sumi Otoshi or corner drop in English. This video was originally going to be about Mifune and his influence on me as a martial artist, but I chose to pick his technical influence on me instead, as focusing on other aspects felt like retreading old ground. If you do want my thoughts on Mifune, I will toss up a screenshot of my community post leading up to this video. Feel free to pause here and read it at your own pace. Or go watch some of the stuff in my philosophy playlist. It's all covered there in some form or another. Likewise, I just posted a video loosely related to this one about why people should train rare or so-called suboptimal techniques. I won't be rehashing that here, but I'll link to it somewhere so you can check that out too on your own time. What I will spend a little time on answering here is why Sumi Otoshi specifically. Sumi Otoshi gets pretty commonly ragged on as just a worse Osotogari because the position is sort of similar. I'm going to come back to that later. And I would not argue that Osotogari isn't clearly the more common and consistent technique. It certainly is. But I don't think this takedown, being Sumi Otoshi here, and that one, Osotogari, are as similar as people make them out to be. That will probably be one of several relatively controversial statements that I make about Sumi in this video. The second reason is that, at least in my mind, Sumi Otoshi is kind of the poster boy for techniques that people think are bullshit. In some ways, I understand that sentiment too. To the untrained eye, it looks like people are just twisting a gi or tapping an arm and someone goes flying. I noted on it in the aforementioned In Defense of Suboptimal Techniques video, but I think a lot of what people label as real in the martial arts community is often just them signaling that it's easy for them to understand. Most people don't really doubt a single leg takedown or foot sweeps or hip tosses because the mechanics are just really clear, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but what I want to point out in this video is that the mechanics are there for Sumi Otoshi, and they're equally as valid, just far harder to see, typically more difficult to orchestrate, and possibly controversial statement number 2, trained wrong in most places. I don't think I can really bring up another technique that has degraded as much over time, perhaps, as Sumi Otoshi, and maybe that's down to its unpopularity. The reality is, with less eyes on a given technique, it's sort of doomed to fall behind the refinement of other techniques, even those in the same system. I'm also not claiming to be some kind of Sumi Otoshi savant either. I think that I've been doing this one wrong up until maybe 2 years ago, which means that most of my career, I just didn't really have any good understanding of Sumi, and it took a lot of personal practice and a lot of film review to figure out how to make it function, and it still isn't as consistent as my A game, don't get me wrong, but it's getting there. I have thrown people with it. Here is how this video is going to work, though. I'm going to break down a bunch of film with the purpose of highlighting the mechanics of Sumi Otoshi. I want to point out the good stuff and the often replicated errors, or at least what I see as errors. I don't want to step on anybody's toes or anybody's sensei's toes, but I do feel pretty strongly that this is one of those techniques that really isn't taught very well. And I don't think that's down to teachers, really. I don't think it's anyone's fault. Like I said, I just think the details of this one have been kind of lost through a game of generational telephone. Finally, I want to look at a couple competition clips of Sumi Otoshi because those are out there, despite being kind of rare. Also, in the spirit of what this whole video originated as, I'm going to start with Mifune's Sumi Otoshi, his venerable Kukinage, and then come back to that same technique towards the end of the video to point out what makes him, in my view, one of the best specialists of the technique, if not the greatest to ever do it, period. Alright, with that all said and done, let's look at some film. Alright, so in the spirit of Mifune, we're going to watch this all the way through here. I don't have a whole lot to add on this clip, except that I think this gets unfairly judged by people. They're doing this very flowy kakari geko, and on top of that, what people really fail to realize a lot with some of the criticism is, well, twofold. One, Mifune is an old man in this film, and on top of that, it's a promotional film. Don't tell anybody. It drives me crazy when people look at promotional films and demonstration material like, well, that's fake. That's fake. Doesn't look like that. No shit, Sherlock. Demonstration films are meant to demonstrate. They're meant to catch the eye and bring people in. Anyway, as far as the Sumi Otoshi itself goes, like I said, I chose it because it looks fake. It's hard for people to understand, and make no mistake, the uke here is definitely cooperating with Mifune. I would never argue that, but there's the bones, the essence of a really slick technique here. I will come back to this video at the very end and really try to show off how, I hate to use the word optimized, but optimized this Sumi Otoshi is. And we will go through it frame by miserable frame. But I need to start making a couple points here. So we're going to leave this here. You've seen it. I've seen it. It's a really famous clip. We will move on to the next one, which is going to be this clip of the kind of bog standard way that they are doing Sumi Otoshi. And I want you to notice a couple things. So the first thing is that this is a back throw. By back throw, I mean this person is getting thrown in the direction that he would for Osotogari. In fact, if we look at this freeze frame, if this leg was here, it would be Osotogari. And this is kind of where people get the idea that this is just worse Osotogari. I'm going to make a very controversial argument, as I probably will continue to make throughout this video, that this Kuzushi is not ideal for Sumi Otoshi. And I know there'll be people out there who are like, how can you say that? This guy is a Kodokan representative, and my sensei said, and okay, and that's fine. I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I'm not saying that this is bad necessarily. I just don't think it's great. I also want to make quick notice of this hand right here. So in the Kodokan version of this technique, there's a lot of head control that's kind of disguised actually as lapel control. I think it's the Tenri guys that invented this way back in like the 60s or 70s, but a lot of judoka will take this lapel and push it up into your chin. And this is fine. You know, we learn that head control, head and hips in grappling are how you control people. So this is good, but I still think there's a better way of doing it, which I will get into in a bit. I also want you to notice again that this is a really big fall, and yeah, it's not like that out in the wild. This is, again, it's promotional material, basically. I know technically it's learning material. This is for people who want to know the Gokyo and reference the techniques they're in, but do people actually fall like that in Randori? Well, we'll see clips later on in sparring, and the answer is no. Oh my gosh, Tengu, this is an Aikido clip. Oh, yeah, it is. So a lot of people will tell you incorrectly that Aikido Sumi Otoshi and Judo Sumi Otoshi are two different throws. They are not. And I will die on that hill. They are wrong. The same principles apply. The reason I'm showing you this clip is because it's a great clip of what I would consider to be everything wrong with the way Aikido teaches Sumi Otoshi, and to a certain degree, even a little bit wrong with the Kodokan Sumi Otoshi, although the Kodokan does a much better job. First and foremost, all this movement. This doesn't happen out in the wild where the hand is just sticking out away from the torso. Doesn't happen. The second you grab a wrist, this is going back in. It's getting tucked. I guarantee it. That's the first thing that doesn't happen. The next thing that should be happening but isn't is better Kuzushi. This guy's being super cooperative. There's actually no reason why this foot should be off the mat. If he's flat-footed, there's no Kuzushi here. He's just falling straight down. This is a shit throw. And I'm not trying to pick on these people here. I'm really not, because this is the way that it's taught in so many Aikido dojos. And it's just bad. The other part of this that you'll notice is that the technique is kind of out this way. That's an unfortunate arrow. It's going down and out. Not even really down. Just kind of out. And she's not even putting her hand on his arm. Like, this is... Okay, maybe a little bit of offense to these people. This is some goofy goober Aikido. I can't say I even like this, even aesthetically. It's not very good. I I'm infamous for not liking I guess not infamous. Like, I'm okay with the aesthetic stuff, but like, if you're gonna do stuff that looks like this, at least make it look pretty. I don't even know what this is. It's not athletic. It's not fun to look at, and it's martially not very good. So I'm not trying to pick fights with anybody. This is an older video. If you folks see this out there, I mean this as kind as I can. This isn't a very good Sumi Otoshi. This next clip is Shishida Sensei, who is a fairly known figure in the Tamiki world, at least known enough that I know about him, and I'm not a Tamiki guy. For what it's worth, all of these videos that I actually know and remember the sources for will be in the description. I should be sourcing them on screen as well when available. And this is actually a series of 3 videos that was posted to I believe, now defunct Aikido channel, which is unfortunate. But what Shishida is going to talk about here is Kazushi. Unlike a lot of Aikido styles, the Tamiki guys pride themselves on good mechanics. Not that Aikikai and Yoshinkan can't. It's just I feel like they articulate them a lot worse than the Tamiki guys do. There's still things I don't like in this video. To start with, I know that this is the normal way for Tamiki guys to train, but again, this like doesn't happen in reality. Even in Tamiki Randori, this doesn't happen. It does a little bit more because they might have a knife in this hand or whatever, but I'm not a huge fan of the knife. Go watch my appearance on the Modern Aikidoist podcast for more on that take. But I don't like this very much. It's fine for learning. What Shishida is going to talk about, like I said, is Kazushi, and he's going to talk about moving the far leg. He's saying that if he just moves the arm, he's going to stand in place, and his feet aren't going to come up. So what he has to do is cut, and now he's getting them to turn. Now, going back several frames, what I don't like about this is watch how much movement there is. Like, cut 1, cut 2, drop. That's 3 steps. That's a lot of time. Now, obviously, Shishida is showing this to his visitor for the sake of the concept, not necessarily the technique, although it is the technique too. And he's a known coach and competitor too, I believe. He's written the book on competition, or at least co-authored it. He doesn't expect his students to perform it this way. I'm sure that he understands that the economy of movement here is out of whack, but for the sake of you at home, yeah, the economy of movement here is out of whack. But his point is well taken about Kazushi. That's why this clip is in here. Here's another clip, more kind of farther out. And yeah, what I don't like about this is, again, we kind of see the same sort of problems here. Look at how far out. Like, the movement here is huge, and I'm not a fan of this. So let's bring up my pencil tool. He's cutting across. Big movement. Big movement. Again, there's this space between arm and torso. That's not a real thing. His uke is going to turn all the way around. If he were actually competing and resisting, he might be able to take Nage's back. Again, as demonstrating the concept, fine. As a competitive tool against live resistance, maybe not. Although to this guy's credit, you know, there is some Kazushi going on here. So that's good. But this massive Sumi is just not a thing. If you're expecting that break fall, don't. So I hope you're recognizing my criticisms here. The first problem is economy of movement. Actually, no. The first problem is when there's no Kazushi. The second problem is economy of movement. If you're making these like big 3-4 steps and they're all gigantic movements, nobody's going to let you do that. And the other problem, I would say, is that look at the vector of this throw. It's kind of out. And when you add the big rowing of the arm, it's really a back throw. And here's more controversy for you. I think this is wrong. The Kazushi should not be this way. Kazushi should be this way. So there's this guy named Tokyo Hirano. He's going to come up again later in this video. But he was one of many great technicians to come out of the judo tradition. And he gave a whole bunch of kind of, I guess you could think of it as theoretical DLC to Kano's original stuff. And in particular, what he added was the notion that Kazushi doesn't just happen in 2 dimensions. It's not, you can throw him back, you can throw him forward, you can throw him side to side and diagonally, but also up and down. Not that you can throw someone up and throw someone down, although I guess you could throw them down. All throws are throws down, right? But that you break their balance in these directions. And this seems kind of unintuitive at first glance, but I think the up one is the more intuitive of the two, and really important in Aikido, actually, because really it's getting a person to stand on their toes, or at least getting one foot to stand on their toes, but ideally both. So if they're up on their tippy toes, then you have their balance, and you can control them easier. With this down Kuzushi, it's kind of like crumpling the person. And I think the big difference between the way that I now do Sumi Otoshi and the more bog standard way that we've kind of looked at so far is that I don't throw people out this way. I put this hand to this ankle, and then with the free hand kind of push the elbow or the head or even the torso is fine at that point. If you can get this hand to this ankle, their whole body just kind of crumples down and they're leaning in towards you. It makes it much more difficult to do this turn and regain the balance. Now there is a case where I wouldn't do this, and that is when they're in kind of a 90-degree like hunched over posture. So if they're like, this is their legs and this is their torso, I wouldn't be trying to push their arm back to their ankle like this. Because to get the throw, you would have to get them to stand up straight again and then fall back over, and that's a lot of extra work. And it really isn't going to happen either. So that's something to keep in mind. But if they're more upright like this, like in a judo, if this is their shoulder, and like in a judo match, or in this case, Tamiki Randori match, and you can put their hand to their ankle, this will break their balance. The other thing too with this is that there's a lot less economy of motion problems. I'm going to move to another clip here to hopefully demonstrate what I'm talking about. So this is the clip in question, and despite my frame by frame not really being that useful this time, what I want you to notice is the direction of this throw. He is going, I know it's kind of hard to see because of the uke being in the way of the camera, straight down almost. And I know he pulls back a little bit at the end. I wouldn't recommend that. But he is putting this hand like right here, maybe a little bit further back. I think it would be even better really close, like almost between his legs, but closer to this front foot. And you can see how his balance is being broken. It's not really this way. It's kind of like towards this back wall and down. And that's what you're looking for. The other component to this is that there's a lot less wonky like cutting going on for the Kazushi. You know, he's not moving this hand all over the place. And although he is doing that very Tamiki thing where he's having Uke just kind of stick his arm out for him, I'm willing to give that a pass because, well, he's demonstrating for students who may not understand. It's easier to see. But he's cutting and go down, and that's what the throw is. And this fall, probably because this kid's a white belt, is more realistic too, for what it's worth. This is probably the fall that you're gonna get when you do a good Sumi Otoshi. It's not gonna be that big, pretty fall. It's gonna be just a tumble. Just a tumble. And we'll see more of this in later Randori examples. So coming back to Judo now, that we've looked at the one arm kind of Aikido variant of this, you'll see that the similar principles are still applying here, but I still see kind of similar problems. So here he is demonstrating the one leg Kazushi, and obviously his partner is again working on it with him. I'm going to trace this because I'm not sure I could get more pixels in this video if I tried. That's what happens when you film on potatoes that we didn't think were potatoes back in 2004, but they were. So there you go. And then Nage's leg is out here. And you can see how people would think, oh, he's going to bring this back leg up to do Osoto. You could see how this is like an Osoto Kazushi a little bit. However, imagine a world where this happened. Obviously, I don't think he's ever going to get a leg quite this high in competition, but imagine just for the sake of argument that he did. Instead of taking this leg and sweeping this leg that's posted on the mat out, what if he just immediately dropped to his knees? Straight down, all weight on this arm. You're still going to get a throw. And that's the difference between Sumi Otoshi and Ondo Sotogari. It's not just use leg, it's the direction. Because the Osoto is kind of an advancing throw that goes out this way. The Sumi Otoshi is straight down. The image that the Japanese will often talk about with Otoshi is that it's like a, crap, I'm blanking on the English word. Taki, waterfall. Waterfalls don't do this. They do this. Sorry, I'm having a Maddenism here with my tools. That's what happens when you give me fun things. The point I'm trying to make with this particular clip is that the same principle is very true. This is Kazushi, and the Kake, is it the, I'm always confused, Tsukuri and Kake. Yeah, Kake. The execution of this is down, not out. Down, not out. The other part of the judo thing that just implicitly gets solved, as opposed to the Aikido version of this technique, is the economy of motion is much cleaner. There's not all these weird shifts because you have control of this far side too. And I still maintain that this far hand can pretty much do whatever it wants as long as the person is straight up and down. Again, there are differences when they're bent over, like at a 90-degree angle, or even something more like that. But straight up and down, you can get away with this. Or I'm sorry, you can get away with putting your hand pretty much wherever you want. Put it on their face, you can put it on their far shoulder, their far sleeve, their armpit, even their torso, probably their belt if you wanted to, whatever you want. The important part if they're standing up and down is this sleeve side. Sleeve and unsoku, sleeve and footwork. This is a Steve Cunningham clip, I believe, and I think it's one of the better ones for Judo Sumi Otoshi on the internet, actually. I'm not going to really break this down because he has a lot of entries basically here, and they're all good. I don't have anything to add about the actual Sumi Otoshi with this clip, other than the stuff that I've already said. I'm really just showing you this here to make more people aware of it because I don't think people are. Um, and again, link will be in the description. This is a really solid video for looking at entries into Sumi. I think he does one from a like an Ashibarai entry. He does the Osoto entry, which again I'm not super into, but fine. But this is pretty good for setups. And if you're looking to systematize Sumi Otoshi, which is definitely a big deal, then this is probably a good place to start. So here is Hinano. Brought him up earlier doing his version of Kukinage. This is the guy that kind of came out with the up and down Kuzushi. Now, you'll notice that in this one, and the reason why I really put this in here is that this guy is kind of crouched over. Now, what Hirano does here is labeled as a Kukinage on the video. I would probably argue that this is closer to an Uki-otoshi, just because the direction is sort of that away. But he has head control, and there is a downward element to this. I'll let this video play. And again, obviously this is all demonstration. And Hinano can be kind of difficult for, I think, the untrained eye to take seriously. I even have trouble taking him seriously because he does a lot of these jumpy, skippy stuff. He kind of looks like a goober while he's doing it. But it's exaggerated to make a point. So again, I would almost call this ukiwaza as opposed to kukinage or sumiotoshi. But this is still a better way of handling it than trying to do the kuzushi that I've been talking about. If they're bent over like this, I think you are better off going that direction, or this direction. Pretty much any direction that isn't backwards. Because to go backwards, you have to make them stand all the way back up and then take them all the way back down. And that's just not very economical. If they're crouched down like this, just remove a post and drive them a direction. Or do like Hinano's doing here and get head control and then just take a step back. You know, some of these throws don't have to be super subtle and complicated. And in fact, I think his earlier version of this is really simple. And I haven't gotten it because people don't usually crouch quite this low. If they are, they're usually going to go for a single leg or something. But this kind of like got your head and then shucking you out. I can definitely envision a universe where someone feels very stupid getting thrown by that. It's pretty slick, actually. Maybe not sexy, but slick. And then finally, I just put this clip in here to demonstrate that you can do this at close range and in no-gi too, just fine. There's downsides to it, as I'm sure a BJJ person will conclude, that this will get your back taken, probably. But my point is that it exists in wrestling, and you can do it close range too if you really want. Now, what I will say about the this will get your back taken argument is that maybe. I think it's probably going to be a bit of a scramble down here, but I think that the thrower still has initiative to just roll over and take side. It might be that this guy is fast enough to take back. He does kind of have the makings of a seatbelt going here, so you got to be quick. Would I recommend doing it this way? Probably not, but it's in here just to demonstrate that the range on this is versatile. You don't need a gi. And in fact, you can do the Tamiki style without a gi too if you really wanted to. So then coming back to Mifune's Sumi Otoshi, because I want to demonstrate here how the Aikido and the Judo Sumi Otoshi are the same throw. That's the first thing. So if we come up here to, there's the Sumi, right? So he does a couple things different. First of all, what I want you to understand is that if he had this far hand on this arm that he's gripping, it would be the Aikido Sumi Otoshi. In principle, it's the same thing. So that's the first thing. Second thing that he does differently from the, I guess, classical Kodokan, the way they're doing it nowadays, is he doesn't go backwards with it. He goes to the side. So the throw is this way and straight down. Not this way. That's no good. Well, I mean, if it works for you, it works for you, I guess. But I've had way less success with that than what he's doing here. The other thing I want you to notice is that he's dropping his level. The Kuzushi here is about verticality, not about covering distance horizontally. However, he's cut out all the fat here. There's no extra movement. He's not even going completely down to a knee in the same way that you often see the Tamiki guys do. He's identified that he's short enough relative to probably most of his uke, because Mifune was a really short guy, that he doesn't need to drop all the way to his knee. He just needs to put a lot of weight on this sleeve. And in this particular case, I don't know what his far hand is doing, but I don't think it matters. This could be an armpit grip. This could be a face grab. Could be on the shoulder, could be on the far sleeve, could be under the elbow. You could knee tap the guy with it if you really wanted to. Yeah, I mean, it could be a belt grip. It could be whatever you wanted, really. The benefit of having the far hand on the far side of the uke is that it definitely stops him from running around and taking your back, or shifting around rather and taking your back. But really, if you have good enough Kuzushi on this side and it is straight down, it should make that turn pretty hard. Again, unless the person is hunched over. Also, I guess now is a good time to say that if you are down here like this and your Sumi fails and you're trying to systematize this, you are awfully close for an ankle pick or just wrestling up to a single leg. And the other benefit of Sumi that I haven't really touched on yet, as opposed to something like Osotogari, for example, is that it's a very low commitment throw. You can do this throw, and look how he's really not compromised at all. Unlike in Osoto, where your leg is tangled up back here, if this fails for him, he doesn't lose anything other than letting this guy know that he likes Sumi Otoshi, which definitely, like, it's a loss, but it's a lot more minor a loss than getting entangled with this guy and kind of getting into an Osoto shootout if your initial attack sucks. Which is something I see a lot with Osoto, is people will entangle their legs like, I got in position. And then it becomes this like 50-50 position, essentially. There is no 50-50 position with Sumi Otoshi. You either get it or you don't. And if you don't get it, you tend to be relatively safe. Again, keep in mind that this is a promotional video. Mifune is supposed to be the winner here. But I think my point remains true that he's not giving anything up to do this. It's just as easy for him to stand back up. All right, let's move on to some sparring footage. So here we see some Sumi action in a Tomiki tournament. So what I want you to notice here is that turn that happens. See how uke turns into it? And in Tamiki, you can kind of get away with this because this guy's trying to do everything in his power to not have his posture broken, because that's going to award points to the other guy. And he's also kind of tripping over him. But I think this is because the Kuzushi is going out instead of down. You know, if he had thrown him straight down instead of pushing out horizontally as opposed to vertically, this probably wouldn't have happened or not have happened to the same degree. Now, again, this is a perfectly valid technique. He wins this match. But in any other format, I'm not a huge fan of this. But it does show that this is a very common organic reaction in sparring. So we have another one here, and this is an annoying one because the ref is going to be in the way. Of course he is. But this one is a little bit better, and I think that I probably got the best frame possible for it, because the throw isn't out this way. It's straight down. And you're going to notice that the partner, the uke, crumples as opposed to like falling backwards. I mean, he does end up on his back, I believe. but it's like a crumpling. Still, yeah, it's much more straight down than the previous clip, and it's going to like right here. So you can see that this is right behind the heel, which is probably a good place to aim for. I would want it to be even closer. If I can make my partner's thumb touch the back of his heel and then push the arm, that's like ideal. It was I think our last Tamiki example. And again, you see this turning. You could argue as a Tamiki guy maybe that this has turned into like Tenkai Kote Haneri, but I really do think he was going for Sumi. And again, the uke turns, and you don't really want them to turn. You just want them to crumple right where they're at, more like the last one. But I won't belabor this point any further. You know where I'm coming from at this point. Again, totally a valid throw by Tamiki standards, but not ideal in my mind for any other format. I'm sorry, we do have one more example. And I bring this one up because this guy kind of cheats. Doesn't cheat in the competition. I mean, he cheats on the technique. And this is the frame in question. Perfect pause. So here, you'll notice that he's actually kind of subtly doing an Osotogari in a way. It is a Sumi, but he's cheating the technique in the sense where he's using his leg very sneakily to prop against this guy's leg. And you'll notice in these two frames, boop, 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 that this leg is blocking his advance as he's pulling this direction. And it is a good understanding of like where to break his balance, don't get me wrong. And again, valid throw, he's taking him down. But as far as being a Sumi Otoshi, A, it's out far like this. B, Sumi Otoshi doesn't rely on blocking the leg at all. I guess if you really wanted to, you could, but this is closer in my mind to being an Osoto, except it's not a gaudy. It's just like a prop, basically. I guess it's Sumi Otoshi, but I'm not going to split hairs and get caught up in nomenclature. I think that's kind of stupid. My point is, though, is that this probably could have been avoided if he just went straight down and tried to put his hand behind his heel. You might not get there sometimes with the hand behind the heel thing, but if you think, then just try to put his elbow behind his butt. Whatever joint you have control over, get that behind him and just go straight down. You'll be fine. Probably. Or you'll lose, and then you can come to my comment section and complain to me about it. And finally, we have a judo example, which it's much rarer to find one of these. But you'll notice here that blue basically does the kuzushi for white. And there's the throw. And the reason I say that is because he picks up his foot. I guess he's trying to like reach for the Osoto or something. And then that puts him on one foot, and White realizes, oh shit, and pulls on that closest sleeve to us, and gets the Sumi. Kind of drives with his head, but it's a Sumi. That's Ippon. As his coach back there is, oh, I'm sorry, it's not Ippon. I guess that's Wazari. Whatever. It's a point. It was considered a valid attack. Yeah, I guess that is Wazari. His knee's down and then his back is down. This is pretty much the best clip I could find of Sumi Otoshi. When it does appear in judo, it kind of comes off scuffed like this, and I think it's just down to, I don't know, people's misunderstanding of it. It's almost a counter throw, like a tsukashi in judo more times than not, as opposed to a genuine attack. And I think that's just down to the misunderstanding about it. Like, it's not a back throw, despite it being taught that way. But that's just me. You also noticed about this is what I said earlier, when somebody's hunched over like this, you want to go to the sides or pull them forward. In this case, he's going to the side.
because there's no post there. He has control of the post. Just put him where the post isn't. If you imagine like a coffee table, let's see if I can do some doodling here. Now, if he's got 4 legs, sort of, this one's gone, this one's gone, this one's gone. So this is a really easy throw. But even in a world where both feet were on the ground, actually, for this, if Nage's head is in this armpit, could probably still push him over. You're probably entering some Kataguruma territory there, but it's debatable. And again, I don't want to get too caught up in nomenclature because judo people freak out about that. And that is basically Sumi Otoshi in a nutshell. There's a lot more film I could show about this, but I feel like I'm belaboring my point. I might run some extra in the background for you while I wrap this up. But yeah, one last point I wanted to make about Mifune here is that his elbow control is kind of important. I talked about if this was a hand that was straight up and down and out, you want to put the hand behind the heel. In this particular case, he's taking this elbow and like the image rather, is that it's sliding straight down the leg. It might even be good to think about trying to cut the leg off with his arm and put this elbow right where my arrow is pointing. But anyway, that's all for the film breakdown. I will now wrap this up in some post. And that is Sumi Otoshi. Here are the takeaway points. First, the kuzushi is down, not out. Second, keep economy of movement in mind. You don't want this big flowing movement, but basically move straight in and then down, placing the hand or elbow at uke's foot, or at least that's the mental image that you're aiming for. Third, your free hand can mostly go wherever you want it to, given the sleeve hand has good kuzushi. It's there primarily to support. Fourth, if your opponent is hunched over, attack to the side or do a turn throw. It isn't worth it, nor is it realistic to try and stand him all the way back up just to apply a Sumi Otoshi in a more classical fashion. And, of course, there are tons of other little details and nitpicks here and there, ranging from footwork to systemization and so on. On a more general scale, I also just wanted to get across that there are genuine mechanics to this throw and that it's not just bullshido. I've seen Sumi Otoshi sort of get put in the bin of unwanted toys by most people, and while I think its kuzushi demands are very high, I also believe that is why people should be playing with it even more. I see a lot of martial artists approach takedowns as like step 1, get into position, step 2, question mark, and step 3, profit. I sense a lot of people ignore the finer points of takedowns and just narrowly chase the desired outcome instead of hammering out the process very well. But I digress. If you like this format of video, please let me know. It was certainly a bit of an experiment, kind of a fusion between something produced and something more freeform. If people didn't like it so much, then I can tweak it from here on out, and when I do a technical piece in the future, I'll make it more presentable or more processed, however people prefer. Anyway, that is all for me for now. If you want to, check out some of those other videos, especially the one that loosely accompanied this, the In Defense of Suboptimal Techniques, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.